Hello, once again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our virtual classroom. And today we're going to jump straight into the assignment and figure out how to solve a proportion. And remember, a proportion is simply whenever two fractions or two ratios are equivalent, or at least they're supposed to be equivalent, but we're missing a part. For example, here we're given, and I'm just going to rewrite it over here as I would want you to do in your own notebook. We have 4/9. And that is supposed to be equivalent to 10 over some number. And we're trying to figure out what is that number supposed to be so that these two are equivalent. The process that I'm about to show you works for any two proportions. Okay, this will always work. So as long as you follow these simple two steps. So after writing down the proportion, 4/9 is equivalent to something else, we're going to use what are called cross products to make an equation. Okay, we're going to use the butterfly method or cross multiplication. How do I know what's going to go on either side of this equation? Well, you simply do the cross products. We're going to do 9 times 10, and we're going to do 4 times x. So again, we're going to do 9 times 10 and 4 times x. So doesn't matter which one you start with. So 9 times 10 is 90. So I'm just going to write 90. And on this side, I have 4 times x, and 4 times x, let me do that a little bit nicer, is simply 4x. So notice, ladies and gentlemen, again, that I made an equation, and on one side I have one of the cross products, and on the other I have the other. Once I do that, it becomes very simple because I simply have to solve the equation, and we know how to solve equations. We must always isolate the variable, and whatever you do to one side, you must do to the other. So the variable is right here on the left side, and I need to isolate the x, meaning I need to get rid of this multiplying by 4. And how do I get rid of multiplying by 4? Well, we divide by 4. All right, so that isolates the x. The x is now by itself. And whatever I do to one side, I must do to the other. So I must divide this 90 by 4. And when I do that, I do 90 divided by 4. 4 goes into 9, and let me use a different color. Twice, 4 times 2 is 8. 9 minus 8 is 1. Bring down the 0. 4 goes into 10 twice again. 4 times 2 is 8. We have a remainder of 2. We keep going. Put a decimal, bring down the 0, and 4 goes into 20 exactly 5 times. So ladies and gentlemen, that means that x has to equal 22.5. In other words, 4/9 is the exact same thing as 10 over 22.5. Now, hopefully that didn't seem too complicated. Let me run through the process once again by leaving this here. So ladies and gentlemen, we started off by making an equation using our cross products. And so I made an equation, and on one side I had one of the cross products, which was 4x. So I put 4x on one side, and on the other I had the other cross products, which was 9 times 10, which is 90. Now it doesn't matter which side you put the cross products in, as long as you have one of the cross multiplications on one side and the other on the other side of the equation. After that, you simply divide, and you always divide by the number next to the variable. So in this case, we have 4 next to the x, so that means that I have to divide by 4. And whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. By working that out, ladies and gentlemen, that'll give you your answer. Let's try another one. In this second problem, let's go ahead and cross multiply. All right, so let me rewrite it. Let me rewrite the problem. We have 5/2 is equal to 6 over x. And it doesn't matter where the variable is, guys. It does not matter. All you need to have is the 3 numbers, so 1, 2, 3, meaning one of the fractions is complete and the other one is not, and the other fraction is not complete. And that's all you need. Now let's just follow the steps. Cross multiply to make an equation and divide. All right, so let's cross multiply. Here we have 6 times 2, which is 12. Again, it doesn't matter which side you put it on. And on the other, you have the other cross product. We have 5 times x. 5 times x. All right, so now we just need to isolate the variable. So you always divide by the number next to the variable. So I'm going to divide by 5. And whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. So x will equal to whatever 12 divided by 5 is. So 12 divided by 5. 5 does not go into 1, but it goes into 12 twice. And we put a decimal, bring down the 0, and 5 goes into 20 exactly 4 times. So that means that x has to equal to 2.4. So as you can see, it's quite simple. We simply make an equation using the cross products, and then we isolate the variable by dividing by the number next to the variable. Whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. Same process every single time. Let's just do one more together, and then we'll go down to the word problems. So again, we write down the problem. 5/2 is equal to 2x. And before I do it, I encourage you to pause the video and see if you can build the equation by yourselves. So again, we are building an equation, and ask yourself, what goes on each side of the equation? Well, we're going to use the butterfly method. Okay, so that means that on one side I need to have 2 times 2, and it doesn't matter which side, and 2 times 2 is 4. And on the other side, we have 5 times x, which is just 5x. Now, be careful, ladies and gentlemen. Don't think to yourself, hey, that looks kind of weird or anything like that. As long as you're following the steps, you will automatically have it set up the right way. Here, again, we're going to isolate the x. So we need to get rid of this multiplication by 5 by dividing by 5, because that is going to cancel the 5. X is now isolated, but whatever I do to one side, I must do to the other. So yes, I must do 4 divided by 5. Again, that is not 5 divided by 4. It is 4 divided by 5. First number goes inside. 4 divided by 5. And we work this out. 5 cannot go into 4, but we can put a decimal and a 0, and 5 goes into 40 8 times. 5 times 8 is indeed 40, meaning that our answer is going to be 8/10. X would equal 8/10. Notice how the process remains exactly the same. We're going to build an equation with the cross products, and then I simply divide to isolate the variable, and that gives me my answer. Let's do some of these word problems. If we scroll down to number 8, let's go to number 8. Notice at this time, we need to set up the proportion. We need to set it up. So how am I going to do that? Well, let's read. It says that the Big Town football team outscored its opponents. So we have Big Town football and their opponents with a ratio of 5-2, meaning that for every 5 points Big Town football has, the other team only has 2. So Big Town, we expect Big Town to have more points. Now, if their opponents have 38 points, how many points did Big Town score? Well, number one, ladies and gentlemen, we need to identify the 2 things that we're comparing here. And it seems like we're comparing Big Town to the opponents. Big Town to the opponents. So whatever has to do with Big Town is going to go in the numerator. Whatever has to do with the opponents will go in the denominator. So Big Town will be 5, and the opponents will be 2, because that's the way the ratio is ordered here. Big Town compared to the opponents. So Big Town is 5, the opponents is 2. However, we're given more information. We see here that it says that the opponents scored 38 points. So ask yourselves, where is that 38 going to go? On the numerator with Big Town or on the denominator with the opponents? Well, obviously, we see that 38 has to do with the opponents, so that's going to go on the denominator. 38, meaning, and the question is asking how many points did Big Town score? In other words, we don't know how many points Big Town scored. All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and do this. Cross multiply and divide. All right, so I'm going to build an equation by cross multiplying. So I have 2 times x on one side. Here's my 2x. And I have 38 times 5 on the other. I have to figure out what 38 times 5 is. So let's go ahead and work that out. 38 times 5, and 5 times 8 is indeed 40. 38 times 5 is 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. All right, so we have 190. So that means that 2x has to equal to 190. Okay, now what do I do, ladies and gentlemen? Remember, we must isolate the variable. Let's solve the equation. Let's get rid of the 2 so that the x can be by itself. So in order to isolate the variable, I must divide by 2 so that x is now by itself. But whatever I do to one side, I must do to the other. So we must do 190 divided into 2. And 2 does not go into 1, but it goes into 19 9 times, because 2 times 9 is indeed 18. And bring down the 0, 2 goes into 10 5 times. 2 times 5 is indeed 10. So ladies and gentlemen, that means that my final answer must be 95. So x has to equal 95. Notice, ladies and gentlemen, first things first, I write down the 2 things that I'm comparing. I wrote down the ratio of those 2 things, and then I use the other additional information to build my second ratio. Then you just cross multiply and divide. It's the exact same process. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you found this video helpful. And with that in mind, again, it really just comes down to 2 different steps. cross multiply and divide. Cross multiply and divide every single time. And with that in mind, I will see you next time.